really matters what you think. It also matters what you do. So if your brain waves don't just sink, what you send out comes back to you.
G'day Australia, good evening Internet, and top of the morning Governor to our friends from jolly old England. Welcome to the Wealth Boomerang Show. This show is not just about the money. The real question is, what is wealth and what does wealth mean to you? If you're already a billionaire, all you lucky people, you may desire additional time to spend with your loved ones. A sick millionaire may wish to give all their money for good health. Some people may want a deeper, more fulfilling spiritual connection. Sometimes you may even be tempted to give away everything that you have for the right relationship. We do believe that whatever you value is wealth to you, and we believe that whatever you send out will come back to you. Every week we speak to people who have operated their wealth boomerangs correctly. They may have boomeranged back from tragedy to triumph, boomeranged back from rags to riches, or just have awesome relationships. The stories will touch, move and inspire you and instruct you on your journey. So sit back, welcome. Thanks for joining us. I'm your host, Jeremy Britton, and this is your Wealth Boomerang Show. Today's guest is the founder of a charity called Who Will Hear My Cry, a charity that raises awareness on rape, child abuse and domestic violence in England and Australia. She's a singer, emotional independence life coach, a TEDx speaker, a keen women and children's advocate, but she hasn't always been about the serious stuff. When she was growing up, her first love was to be a singer and a stand-up comedian. She worked with an array of women over the years and has always had a bugbear about why so many women and girls who are smart and beautiful end up in relationships that cause damage to them emotionally, mentally, physically and financially. She felt that she found the key as to why this kept on happening, and women hadn't eaten from the tree of knowledge. They were making mistakes and making these bad choices because no one had really told them what to look out for and what to avoid. Dilys Sillah's debut book, Predator or Prince, is the fruit from the tree of knowledge. She's offering this book to womankind to keep them and their children safe from dangerous relationships and to help them present the best version of themselves to their potential love interest. Dilys, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
I ask you a silly question. How many people call you Phyllis Diller?
I get the Phyllis bit. I don't think people can quite get their head around the fact that it's actually Dilys. So I just say, look, Phyllis with a D, and normally we're cool after that.
So you were born in Africa or you were born in England?
I was born in England. Mm-hmm. And Who Will Hear My Cry is a charity in England and in Ghana. I'm coming to Australia soon, but not yet.
Okay. Well, we'll hold a space for you here, you know. As you can tell, we've got really good internet and it's all fantastic.
Yeah, we'll keep our fingers crossed.
So for you, I mean, did you go through a horrible experience, the relationship from hell, and then decided to write a book about it?
No, actually, I didn't. I mean, I think most women do have dodgy relationships that they can, you know, use as reference points. But I haven't really had terrible relationships, though I can relate to certain elements of what I write about, you know, in the book. Mm-hmm. But what really got me writing about this was partly because of the charity that I run. And I just really felt, even just talking to different women around me, that it wasn't that these women were not smart. We are smart, but we just don't know what to look out for. No one says to us that when a guy does X, it actually means Y. And because of that lack of knowledge, we're going into these relationships with different expectations and misinterpreting what's actually being offered. Because whatever's being offered doesn't change. We just don't know what's on offer. It could be one thing, but it really is something else.
I guess, you know, like in olden times, there'd be someone, your mum or your grandma, who would actually take you out to the garden and say, okay, these are the herbs that we eat and these are the ones that we cook with, and these are the ones that are good for botulism or scabies or whatever. And these are the ones that don't eat. You know, don't wipe your butt on a stinging nettle. Don't eat this one. It's poisonous. But we don't really have that wisdom for relationships. Now, your background is actually as a personal trainer. So you're all about the physical health So
Yeah.
what brought you across to the emotional side?
Well, what it was a few years ago, I was coming up to my 42nd birthday, and I thought,
42nd?
Yes, I'm going to be 46 next week.
Okay, continue.
Let's never ask a woman her age, but I don't care. So I was coming up to my 42nd birthday, and I thought, you know what, I actually want to be fit and healthy. I don't just want to lose weight. Not that I was particularly large, but I knew that I wasn't healthy. So I decided to just really start this small group on Facebook called the Fit Chicks Club. And I just wanted to connect with friends who were already on their fitness journeys. And I just wanted a little bit of, encouragement. Cut a long story short, that group just grew and grew and grew. And it became very much about supporting one another, not just about our physical, health journeys, but also emotionally as well. And women were sharing some very personal things and would contact me privately to say, look, I was either raped or I was a victim of child abuse or domestic violence. But what was happening was their experience was showing up in their relationship with food. So as a coach, I was helping them to make that correlation and then help them, deal with the actual issue, because the issue wasn't the food. The issue was the trauma. And that's where we start working from. So as a knock on from that, I then decided that, look, rather than me try and answer questions from women one-on-one, why don't I just do some YouTube videos to address some of these issues? So the first video that I was about to do turned out to, well, I ended up doing it on rape because it was somebody...
As you do, like your first debut video, like why not just start with something benign and innocuous and just start gently?
For some reason, what had happened was there was a very prominent media personality in Ghana who was accused of raping a 19-year-old girl whilst he was on holiday in Ghana. He lived here in England. And I was quite appalled at the attitudes, particularly towards this 19-year-old girl that had been raped. And I realized that actually you guys have got no clue as to what rape actually is and what it isn't. So it was through addressing that. I mean, all sorts happened. I mean, the family of the accused started to threaten me, and I had death threats and all this rubbish. I'm really not one to threaten, so, they kind of found that out the hard way.
Don't threaten the tough personal trainer.
Well, I just don't do bullies in any way, shape or form. I was so not having it. And then what happened was other people started to come out of the woodwork. And I just felt that, well, I can't stop now. Where do these people go? I mean, I'm having people say that, the first person that I've told ever in my life. And that's how Who Will Hear My Cry started. So that's kind of a bit of a background as to where I was and where I am now.
Okay. That's probably not the first time that I've heard the emotional eating thing. And a lot of people say, well, I eat because I'm bored or because I eat because I'm lonely. But you're talking about some really deep psychological traumas and things like that. So how many times would you have seen this sort of pop up before you finally went, okay, I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to build an empire?
I think it was really about that rape case. That's what did it for me, because I thought, hold on, there are so many people, and that's why it's called Who Will Hear My Cry. And I think I was literally having a conversation. And I think I said, well, who's going to hear the cry of these people? I'm like, bam, that's what I'm going to call it. Because that's exactly what's been happening. These women have been crying out. These children have been crying out. And nobody has heard them. And I think it was just the fact that I knew that they needed somewhere to go that was non-judgmental. And sometimes due to certain cultures and what have you, it's very judgmental. I mean, this 19-year-old girl was called a whore. Oh, these girls nowadays, they're gold. I mean, the guy was broke. He didn't have any money anyway. He just needed personality. I had a lot of information on this guy. He was a wealthy person, but the whole focus was on her. And I'm like, the guy's 49, for God's sake. She's 19. His kids are older than her. I can't quite understand why the whole focus is on her. Well, it turned out because of, Ghana isn't like Australia or England. You don't have that kind of, censorship when it comes to victims of rape and that kind of stuff. So her medical records were released. And it was that she was actually a virgin.
Wow.
And ironically, the poor child had never even had sex before. And how you berated her vilified her. I mean, what wasn't she called? And I felt that I was doing a disservice to, you know, a lot of women if I didn't stand. I mean, I'm pretty hardcore, so I'm not somebody that you can bully. I would not shy away from standing up for what I believe in, or for justice, what I feel is right, you know. And I felt that if I was the person, by a sheer fluke or whatever you want to call it, destiny, fate, whatever, to be the voice of these women, then that's exactly what I was going to be. And that's why I am where I am now.
Fantastic. The passion's coming through, and I realise it's actually after midnight in the London studio there. So and you've had a 3-hour speaking engagement before you came here.
Passion.
You're still fired up. So you're sort of standing up on behalf of these women. Understand there's women who have had bad relationship after bad relationship after bad relationship. And I can't believe that every man out there is a beater or a cheater or whatever. But sometimes you hear a woman who, like, her last 3 boyfriends beat her up, or her last 3 boyfriends cheated on her. So why do women fall into these patterns?
I think it's because, again, as I said, not only do we not know what to look for, but we sometimes don't recognize that we are the common denominators in these relationships. And it's funny because tonight when I was speaking at Raymer Work in London to the young adults group, and I was saying that at their age, I think the average age in the room was about 25, 26. And I said, well, I don't know if you've had enough relationship experience to be able to process map the relationships you've been in and identify some of the common trends that's been going on. Because when you're able to do that, you're actually on your way to solving the problem. Because sometimes women don't know that this is how they show up. How we show up in relationship, we don't always know. And I think that it takes a conscious effort to sit down and be very self-reflective, be very honest with what you see and start to deal with it. And it's not easy because sometimes the behaviors are there for good reason. Things, you know, we've gone through certain experiences and it could be anything that makes us show up in a particular way. And I promise you, sometimes, many a time, these women just don't know. They don't recognize what the patterns are.
So we're talking 2 things. We're talking the patterns that they'll recognize in other men and say, okay, if he does this, then he's probably going to be a rat bag. But also the patterns in themselves, and looking at themselves and says, okay, what is it about me that always attracts someone who's like that? So very interesting case study. Question for you, just out of left field. Obviously a lot of women buy the book, a lot of women benefit from the book, but what do you think is in the book for the men?
Quite a lot. And I'll tell you why I say that. One of the things that I talk about in the book, in fact, where the book starts from, is from a very self-reflective perspective. So it looks at our relationship with our fathers and how that, and it sounds very cliched, but it's just a fact, and how that as a template for the relationship that we women go into moving forward. And that's even when there is no father there. So I have something that I call the present absent father, that in the mind of a child, that man is there. Now, how that picture is painted mentally as to whether he is the superhero that would be here if he could, but it's just because of circumstances that he's not here, or it's that horrible man that left us and I'm never going to allow any man to ever do this to me again, and when I'm old enough, I'm going to be da-da-da-da. So depending on who you choose as, you know, to be that man that you look up to, that becomes reinforced normally after your first love encounter. And I would say for us women, it's probably, you know, in our late teens or early 20s when we really enter into that relationship, that, you know, our first love or whatever. What is important is if that relationship does not end in a way that was on our terms and reinforces that type of rejection that we had in the beginning, it kind of solidifies everything that was wrong. And then what we do moving forward is something I call the chameleon syndrome, which is just adapting ourselves to avoid rejection. So it's like we present a color chart, you know, like when you're painting your house and you've got these little charts and you take your notes, And we kind of do that. We say, right, okay, here's a color chart. You pick the color that you want, and I'll do that for you, so you don't need me. And we keep on doing that till we become comfortable, i.e., we are trying to be all things to all men, but nothing to ourselves. That's where that, you know.
They say that's a surefire recipe for unhappiness, is trying to please everybody, because in the end you're not pleasing yourself. But
you see, this is one of the things that I deal with a lot in coaching, that sometimes we do things, but there's a trade-off for us. So in that scenario, the trade-off is, well, at least I'm not alone. And as ridiculous as it sounds, that woman feels, well, at least I've got somebody. At least I'm not by myself. And that makes it okay to suffer emotionally, you know, mentally, and to the point where you don't actually exist enough to even object to it. But at some point, my hope is that that light switches on and you realize that you've got one life to live, and therefore live it well and live it on your terms. So, you know, that's kind of where we go with that.
Do you find that's an issue that's for the boys as well? Or they stay in a relationship that's a bad relationship because, well, at least I've got someone to come home to, even though she's nasty and horrible, and maybe she's a beater, maybe she's a cheater, maybe she's whatever?
I don't think it's the same for men to that degree. Because emotionally, what we use to validate ourselves is quite different. So, for example, and I mentioned this in the book as well, how boys respond to rejection is slightly different. You guys go more on a power trip. And yes, some women do that, but you guys just become a little hardened. And I tell a story in the book of an ex-boyfriend of mine, where we were sitting down talking about something, and I noticed that he had this chain around his neck that I really didn't like. It looked just so dingy. I didn't really see the point of him wearing it. So I asked him, you know, what's with the chain? And he got very, you know, emotional. And he said he got it from his ex-girlfriend, and they broke up, and it was very painful. And so I'm thinking that maybe it was the girl that he was dating before me. Now, he was 23 at the time. I was like 19. He said he broke up with this girl when he was 12. And he sat bawling his eyes out. He was crying at his recollection of that experience. Totally bizarre. But and I shared this again with the group that I spoke to this evening. And I said how those broken relationships manifest themselves, from my experience with the numerous guys that I've spoken to, is there's one of two things or both that happens. Either they are emotionally unavailable, or they are extremely promiscuous, which probably ties both of them together. But in terms of being emotionally available, no. Primarily because of that first love encounter and that woman breaking, or that girl breaking their heart. I kid you not, 12. But he's not the first. Or maybe not that young, but clearly those emotions were enough for him to recollect them at the age of 23. Crazy.
Wow. I'm just trying to think of some of the experiences I had when I was 12. And I don't think I had the emotional capacity to feel some of these feelings. So allowing the 12-year-old me to run the next 20, 30 years of my life would be maybe a little bit not helpful.
Yeah. It kind of took me aback too.
So there's a lot of tips and techniques and strategies in the book. What do you think is one or two of the most powerful strategies for reframing how things were, perhaps the damage from when you were 12 or when you were 6, or, you know, my dad didn't love me or my mum wasn't there, or what's the most powerful strategies for moving on and changing that script?
I think there's no quick fix. I think you have to come to a place where you are able to recognize the things that do not make you happy, the things that don't serve you, and really sit down consciously to look at yourself and see where those emotional potholes are, how they came about, going back and then seeing how best you can fill them. And sometimes you may need some external help to be able to help you see that. So, you know, I've had a couple of clients that when I've asked them what their first love relationship was like, they were dumbfounded at the issues that came up and how they played out certain things, you know, moving forward. And I sometimes am taken aback because they're pretty heavy things. I mean, because of confidentiality, and I don't know whether the person would watch this, I can't give too many details. But with one person, they had actually had to have a termination without wanting it. And, you know, the family forcing her to go through that. Very traumatic. And, you know, so many other things happened. But she only ever made that correlation when I became her coach. And it kind of put things in perspective for her. So, you know, sometimes, you know, we can do the best that we can do. And I think that's good that, you know, at the point at which we recognize that something is not quite working for us. So therefore, what can we do? That's our key. That's our key to say, right, maybe I need to speak to somebody that can help me. So it doesn't have to be a life coach. It could be a counselor. It could be, you know, a mentor, whatever. But speak to somebody that is trained and trusted that can help you on your road to, you know, completely being emotionally independent, which is something that, you know, I work on with my clients.
Yeah. I'm just thinking, you talked before about people who had, you know, like body issues or weight issues or eating disorders or things like that. But I'm now thinking there's people out there who maybe gamble too much, or people who spend too much, or whatever. There's other things that are showing up in their life that they may not actually identify, oh, this is because of an emotional issue, this is because of a relationship issue, whether it's a relationship with themselves, with their partner, with their dad, with their mum, whatever. How many of these would you say are actually caused by emotional wounds or by relationship wounds?
I would say a lot of them, because if something isn't a foundational thing, it won't keep repeating itself. It would be a one-off. But if you find that this is how you're showing up time and time again, then there is a fundamental problem that you haven't quite dealt with, maybe because you haven't identified it. But you're going to, as I said, it has to be a very conscious thing where you sit down and look at what keeps being repeated. So, for example, I shared with the group that, you know, when I decided that I wanted to get married, I thought, I want to be the best wife that I can be. Therefore, what are the things about me that aren't great? Now, obviously, there weren't very many. But one of the fundamental things about me was I'm not a nagging woman. I say it once, twice, 3 times, and I am gone. And when I mean gone, I mean literally. As in, if you get a phone call, you're lucky. I'm gone. Vamoose. Vanish. And I realized that, I realized years later what it was. It was a vulnerability issue. I don't want to be vulnerable to it. But I realized you can't do that if you want to get married. Unless you want to be like Elizabeth Taylor and be married multiple times. You can't do that. You've got to learn. It wasn't so much the compromise. I had no issue with compromising. I'm very much a negotiator. But I didn't want to be vulnerable and trust you to do something that you say you will do and then fail. So I will make that decision for you. And I just won't be there, in which case there won't be a problem. But I couldn't do that in marriage. So I had to look and say, well, what do I need to work on and where does this come from? And I had to deal with that. So for somebody else, it could be an anger issue, that you're always so bloody angry. Well, why? You can't do that if you want to have a peaceful home. You know, or the fact that you keep on cheating on your partner. What is it? You know, and this is why sometimes when I speak to couples, I say sometimes infidelity has got nothing to do with you. We have this very textbook fairy tale thing that, you know, if you really love me, you wouldn't cheat. Mind my French, but that's bullshit. You know, sometimes there are different reasons why people cheat, and by no means, especially as a woman, would I justify it. But sometimes there are reasons that are deeper than you because they were unresolved before they met you. What is manifesting is a symptom. It is not a cause. And that person has to work through those issues. As to whether you want to work through those issues with them is another matter entirely. But I think sometimes it's not a personal thing, as in I'm cheating on you. They're cheating on themselves. They have an issue with being faithful to themselves. So you coming into that equation just have to, they automatically have 2 people to be unfaithful to. So there's different things that show up, and a lot of us come into these relationships broken and with baggage. And we, as I said, we don't always know what baggage we carry. But if we spend a little bit of time having that me time and separating ourselves and having, you know, some silence around us, a lot can be revealed. You know, you're a coach, and I'm sure, you know, one of the things, you know, that's very powerful is when we hold that space, when we just keep quiet and allow that person to think. And I always say magic happens in those moments. And I think we have to do that with ourselves often, because so much will show up if we hold that space, you know, for ourselves.
I like how you're talking about, you know, a bit of meditation, a bit of introspection, because there's a lot of people out there who say, you know, watch out for this red flag, and if a guy is rude to the waiter, then he's probably going to be a horrible husband, and if he's mean to the dog when the dog pees on the carpet, then he's probably going to be a horrible husband. So the women are sort of out there looking for like bad things about guys. You're actually talking about, first of all, look at yourself. Like, you wanted to look at yourself and say, okay, what's bad about me that I need to work on first? I think that's fantastic, because all work starts from within, right?
Absolutely. It sounds so cliche and so corny, but the fact is you will attract who you are. It's a fact. If you're well balanced, emotionally in control, there's certain types of men that you won't attract. Any guy that's a gaslighter, i.e. somebody that wants to play with your mind, you know, mentally and think you're crazy, isn't going to come for someone like me. You'd go mad before I do. You know, it's not going to happen. Because I'm just not, I'm not in that place. And I'd be too much like hard work. And that's just a fact, because you're going to see a woman that is confident, she knows who she is, and she ain't going to take any crap. And that's the bottom line, you know, more being in that safe place within myself and having that emotional independence, that the decisions that I make, they are well balanced, they're well thought out, they are, you know, systematically analyzed. I'm not just doing things on a whim or just purely being led by my emotions or my past bad experiences. So when you are in that place, a guy that will come in, even if he's been able to trick you for a moment, the moment you see what shouldn't be seen, you're gone. What happens is when you stay there, that's the evidence and the proof that you're not quite there yet emotionally and mentally. Allow such a person to remain in your space. So if ever you can it, you have to.
Okay.
I think a bit. Yeah, I can see you now.
Yeah. So we're talking about sort of, there's red flags from the bloke's behaviour or the other person's behaviour. There's things that we don't like in ourselves that we can actually work on. Tell me about some of the green flags. What are the good things that we should look out for?
Well, I spoke to a friend and she forgot to tell me that she'd moved months ago, but she'll have to pay for dinner to compensate me for that. But she was saying that, you know, she'd not been well, and he had driven like across the, you know, the other side of London to literally get her something to eat. You know, the person after her, you know, bought something for the kids and literally drove back home. And she said to me that there's just little things that this guy does that is just so considerate. And it meant even more to her because she was actually going through quite a lot of difficult stuff with her health and just other things, just life generally. But he showed up as such a stable and kind person that it showed her that this guy, he really is a lovely person. And I think when somebody is a good person or they have a good heart, it doesn't need interpretation. Because the one thing that it is it's consistent. It's not he's nice one minute and the next minute he's telling you that you're fat and you're ugly and that, you know, you're not really going to amount to it. He's not going to be playing with your mind. And you'll see it in the little things. You know, I think the green flags are quite obvious. And I think the other thing is your gut. You know, that little, you know, still voice, you know, between your navel and the other thing that if you hit it, it can wind you, that bit. You know, when you feel that, when that voice speaks to you from there, you know, because even if the person is showing you all these green flags and you have that feeling, you have a responsibility to yourself to listen to it. Sometimes you don't even explain it to anyone. Just make your decision, because sometimes people can't see what you feel.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's important. Just follow your instincts. You'll know if he's a good guy.
And this is again we're generalising and being sexist about the boys and the girls, but men tend to have fewer social circles and fewer boyfriends that they talk to about their emotions and their relationships and that sort of stuff. But a lot of women tend to have more girlfriends and talk more about their emotional issues in their relationship. So to what extent, like if your gut's saying, I'm not sure about this guy, but all of your friends are saying he's wonderful, or if your gut's saying that he's wonderful, but all your friends are saying maybe he's not the one, what would you do in that situation?
I think, let's be clear, I don't think that sexists speak about their emotions as much as women. We're just designed differently, and I'm so not politically correct in this thing that, you know, we're all the same way. It's just it's crap. I'm sorry. You know, we are different, and it's a great difference, and we're different for a reason, and that's what makes the world beautiful. The fact that we are different. And I think more women should celebrate that and respect it, and I think more men should as well. But I think that's the problem, because, for example, when you have these men that are absolute experts at masquerading as princes when they're really predators, other people aren't going to see it. There are men that have sexually abused children. You know, there are men who beat their wives, but nobody would ever know, because they are the of the community. They are so respectable. I mean, gosh, you've got people in churches abusing, you know, children. You can't get higher than that. So you have to trust your instinct. If you're feeling that something doesn't quite add up, then it doesn't add up. Don't question it. Just believe it, because in time you will be proved right. And yes, it is difficult when he's good looking. You know, he's spoiling you and blah blah blah, and all your girlfriends think he's absolutely wonderful. They're not dating him, and if the proverbial hits the fan, it's on you. So you've got with big girl knickers and say, well, actually, no, I don't like him. Hit the road, Jack. End off.
I find, you know, I mean, I don't know whether it's modern times or because we spend so much time in computers or screen time or whatever, a lot of people have actually lost or diminished that intuition or lost faith. They stop listening to the inner voice. They stop feeling the gut.
Yeah.
So what sort of tips and techniques do you have for people to get back in touch with that inner knowing, the inner intuition?
Get back with yourself. Once you get to know yourself, you're happy. I'll tell you, you know, a bit of an example here. When I was younger, I used to say that I absolutely hated being on my own. And I thought it was actually cute. Oh, I've always got to have people around me. I thought it was cute. And I started to, you know, increase in brain cells and get to know myself as a woman. And when you come to a place where you like your company so much that everybody else is just there to compliment you, your approach to life is very different. I mean, I've developed that thing. I never pronounce it properly. Tinna something. You know when you hear that banging noise?
Tinnitus.
That's the one.
Yeah.
I've developed that in my right ear, and I was doing some research on it. And one of the reasons is when you sit in silence too much. That's me to a T. I love silence like you wouldn't believe. And though I'm very talkative, what have you, I love my own space to a fault. I think a lot. So I think when you are, I mean, don't be, you know, I probably am a bit of a recluse. I'm probably one of those old women that would be just, you know, in a house on the hill in my rocking chair with a bottle of champagne, definitely. But I think it's very important to love that space, because that's your thinking space. Sometimes there's too many people around you, you can't think. You know, you've got to be able to be in that place that allows you to even assess your day. You know, what happened today that I could do differently tomorrow? And yes, some of these things do sound really cliche, but they are the truth. And it's important you can actually be in that space, because that's how we are able to grow. And as I started to grow, I didn't need all of that around me. There are people that will go into relationship after relationship. There is no place because they do not like to be on their own. It's a dangerous place, very dangerous.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. So when you sort of push everybody out and have your quiet time, like how do you deeply go within yourself? Do you do yoga? Do you swim? Do you meditate? What's your inner stillness?
So yes, I meditate when I read the Bible. So my meditation is based, on that. That's where I get this self-confidence, that faith that, no matter what situation I'm going through, it'll be okay. So that's what works, for me. It could be somebody else, it could be their faith, whatever that may be. But I think the key thing is it has to be something that makes you feel safe and makes you feel good, and yeah, I think, for me, that's just how I've been for, quite some time. And I've grown in a way where I'm unapologetically myself, warts and all, nobody is perfect. And yes, there's things about my character that could improve, but like everybody else, I don't suffer fools gladly. I hate people that are rude. I cannot stand rude people at all. Little things that, make us who we are. And it's okay. It's all good.
So you don't do that whole English thing, like when someone gives you a really bad meal in a restaurant and you go, oh, I'm sorry, but there's something wrong with, like, you're apologising to the waiter because your meal isn't cooked properly. That seems to be a very British thing, is don't raise a fuss.
Well, I do make a fuss, and maybe that's the about me, because I eat out a heck of a lot. That's one of the things that I absolutely love to do. And I hate to go and spend money on food that is not great. But I'm never, as I said, I cannot stand rude people. I am always very polite. I'm just trying to think, do I ever say I think when I say I'm sorry, but I can't eat this, is not, I don't mean it as in I'm really sorry. I'm thinking, this is crap. Can you take it away, please? I think maybe in that sense. But yeah, I guess it is a British thing.
I mean, just from travelling around, I know that the British are sort of very apologetic and trying to stiff up a lip and not make a fuss and not show emotion, whereas Americans don't care. Americans just sort of tend to be a bit more expressive. Potentially, yeah, from my perspective, it's a little bit more rude, but they're just more opinionated or more comfortable saying, hey, this is crap, you need to fix it.
I've been to New York because I used to sing and I used to record in Brooklyn. If it's New York, it's rudeness. Trust me.
But that's just from our cultural perspective. See, I'm in New York, I think they're driving on the wrong side of the road, but it's not, it's just different. It's not wrong for them, it's just different.
Well, I've had some encounters where I've been like, what? And it's probably worth mentioning that I, have contracted for a number of years doing, within the field of customer services. So whether designing customer services packages, whether it's delivering complaints training. So I look at the rudeness in a completely different context to maybe the average person. So, because I train people on it.
Would they consider it rudeness though? Or would they, in New York, would they just consider it normal?
If someone spoke to them like that, they wouldn't appreciate it. In which case, yes, I think that would be their yardstick. I'm sure, if the tables were turned, they wouldn't appreciate it. In which case, therein lies your answer.
Okay, so that would be the acid test then for the relationships. Is if he's doing this to you and you wouldn't do that to him, or vice versa.
Yeah.
So.
I think
very cool. So you've travelled around a bit. I noticed your TED talk that you did was actually in Africa.
It was indeed, yes.
Yeah. So in your travels around, which accents would you say are your favourite?
My accents? Well, I like accents of places that I haven't actually ever been before. So, I love the American accent. But I guess we're kind of conditioned to like American accents, I think.
From watching Seinfeld, or?
Again?
From watching too much Seinfeld?
Sorry, I missed what you said there.
We're conditioned to like the American accent from watching Seinfeld?
Oh, well, that came a lot later in my life. I think from when we were small, even watching the cartoons like Bugs Bunny and stuff. I think you kind of, it's not it's a familiar accent. I love the Indian accent, like with a passion, like really, really. I love Indian people. I've always been fascinated with Indian people. So yeah, I've always loved the accent. When they are talking like this, I'm finding it very, very interesting. And it's quite a big thing for an Indian actually to talk like this in this body, Oh, I love it. You know, I absolutely think it's amazing.
That is so good.
I've had a lot of batches.
I've got a few Indian friends, and yeah, as you say, like, you know, coming out of the black body with that accent,
It's so bizarre, right? And I have a lot of Indian friends, and some of my, you know, my friends say to me that I do a better Indian accent than them, and they're not lying. I had an Indian that asked me, how do you spell tandoori? I'm like, are you kidding me? And her surname's Patel. So hey, take from it what you will, you know. So yeah, they're great people.
Oh, fantastic. With the TED Talk, as I say, you did the TED Talk, and it started off, imagine you're a woman. And I'm like, okay, well, I can't really imagine I'm a woman. But then it just got more depth and more depth and more depth, and the feeling and the emotion. And I'm sort of, oh, this is actually interesting, and very, very different from a lot of the other TED Talks that I've watched. And then right at the end, I don't want to spoil the ending for anybody who hasn't seen it yet, but a TED Talk with a song? I've never seen anything like it. What inspired that?
I guess what had happened is I had a lot of trouble with my singing. I mean, I had a lot of great moments, but I hit some pretty... So I just thought, I'm not dealing with anymore, and I'm not going to... And in the church that I now go to, and it was on the 31st of December, I believe, 2015, and I watched, because it was done as a Facebook Live, and I watched it back, and I was actually in tears. And I remember saying, God, I'm so sorry. Every gift that you have given me, I am going to use. And I remember a friend's daughter died about 2 years prior, and we had the memorial service, and I was singing. And one of the ladies that I used to sing with was literally in tears, and she said to me, you have no right to stop singing. The gift is not for you, it's for the people. That hit me in my gut, I tell you. And I was like, wow, that's true. That's not for me to be that selfish. And that kind of stuck in my head. And I thought, well, okay, well, maybe I don't want to be a singer in the typical sense anymore. But as a speaker, then I will use it in that way. And that's how I kind of incorporated it in my TED Talk.
Mm-hmm. You've got a lot of talents, don't you?
I guess. I guess.
And not just being able to do the Indian accent, but also the singing and the speaking and the coaching and the physical health and the emotional stuff.
I love people. I really, really, really love people. And it's so important for me that people do well. Mm-hmm. Too many people are hurt in this world, too many. And there's too many walking wounded that don't even know that they're wounded because it's inside. If you cut your hand, you know that, ouch, it hurts there and it's bleeding and I need to treat it. But people that are hurting here and here, there's too many of them, too many of our children that grow up into, you know, walking wounded adults. And I just feel that if there's anything that I can do to help ease that, then that's my calling. That's what I need to do.
Well, the book is a big help. The TED Talk is a big help, and obviously the coaching that you do on an ongoing basis is a big help. There's so many things that are socially acceptable. You know, obviously, you know, it's not socially acceptable to be shooting up heroin in the front of a room. But there's a lot of other people who, as we said before, you know, may be addicted to coffee or cigarettes, addicted to alcohol. They may be addicted to overspending or overeating, and these things seem to be socially acceptable. So you don't start to examine what's at the core of that. Yeah. What do I need to heal so actually this symptom doesn't show up in my life anymore? So, fantastic. I'd love to spend another like 3 or 7 hours with you and working on some of these issues, because there's so much that you've got that will help so many people. I understand you're going to give us a couple of prizes for our lucky viewers today, so some people can actually get a copy of your book. Is that correct?
Yes, so this is the book, and I don't know whether it's going to be back to front because, you know, that whole mirror thing, I never could figure that out. But this is a cover of the book. So, so for the first 2 people that go onto my website and send me a message with their address in it and any message they would like me to write in the book, I will post them a copy to wherever they are, obviously free of charge. And I will also offer the first 2 people that book to employ me as their coach, not only will they get a free, hours consultation, but I will give them a special price for being the first 2 that have listened to this show and are quick off the mark. So yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. So a couple of people out there, if you're quick, then you can jump in and get a signed copy of the book, which is going to be worth millions and millions of dollars. The website is dilysillah.com, so it's DILYSSILLAH.com. That's 2 S's, 2 L's. Make sure you spell that. Don't call her Phyllis Diller because she'll get cross and she'll write your name wrongly in the book.
He's a darling.
Dilys, it's been fantastic chatting with you today. Really appreciate your time. Thank you for the great work that you do. If you go to the website, again, if you missed out on the book, that's okay. You can still buy copies of the book and you may still be able to get them signed. There will be links on... I just did it myself. There will be links on Dilys's website to the TED Talk, for those of you who are interested in hearing the TED Talk. It's very fascinating. And also to her charity organisation, Who Will Hear My Cry. So if you want to get behind that, perhaps get involved, donate, find out more about what they do, because this is an issue that affects all women, whether they're this big, or mums, women's, children's, everyone. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And thanks to you at home for watching the Wealth Boomerang Show. Every week we profile someone who has boomeranged back and created their own wealth in their own way. So Dilys is now happily married, has a couple of children. Your husband is Eddie, I believe?
Yes, he is indeed.
Good. Make sure I don't mispronounce that name. And next week we'll have someone who's an awesome guest, not necessarily on relationships, because as we say, there's wealth in all areas. So feel free to jump onto the Wealth Boomerang Show on the website, wealthboomerangshow.com, jump onto the Facebook group, suggest some guests that you'd like to see, perhaps ask some questions of the guest if there's something that Dilys, you might like her to touch on. Absolutely. Book in to watch the next show. Remember, what you send out comes back to you. Your wealth is whatever you value, and your wealth is whatever you say it is. Good night, Brisbane. Good night, London. Good night, Ashley, my rose. Daddy loves you. And see you next week for another